Welcome to the Augmented Advisor. Today, we are talking with someone whose videos have been viewed over 350 million times. He's one of the biggest creators in finance, certified financial planner Nick Meyer. If you want to grow your business by using short-form video, this episode is for you. We talk about everything it takes to create short-form video that reaches huge audiences, how to keep them watching and get them to subscribe, and of course, how to convert leads. I learned a lot, and I hope you do too. Nick Meyer, welcome to the Augmented Advisor. So happy to have you, man.
Happy to be here, John.
We've been thinking about this for a while. I got a chance to talk with Nate a few episodes ago, your partner, but this finally came together. So excited to have you here. And you know, I've been looking at what you've done on social media with short form video, and honestly, I'm blown away. It's a bit insane, right? Because we're talking millions of views and millions of subscribers, and that's hard to wrap your head around. And I realize as a creator, you're like, yeah, but that's just what I do. But for the rest of us, I think close to 2 million followers, you know, well over 40 million views on all your videos. Talking about finance, I mean, that's nuts, man. That's just, it's crazy. You're in this tiny little stratosphere of a handful of creators with that kind of exposure, particularly around finance. And I'm curious, what do you think made you break out? Like, how did you separate yourself from others? I mean, I've got my ideas, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, it's weird because my videos, they've been viewed by over 350 million people. So it's just kind of interesting to think about like the magnitude of the reach. It's like, okay, basically for every one person in the United States, that's basically how many people see my videos. It's crazy. But to get to your question.
Whoa, sorry. I just got to collect myself there a little bit.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah.
But to get to your question, what made me break out? Why am I so special or not special? What did I do? I think it really comes down to like three different things. One is what I'll call like content identity. Two is making every single video with the viewer in mind. And three is just consistency. I'll do a quick little explainer of each of those. So content identity, the easiest way to explain this is if you turn on ESPN, what do you expect to see? Like sports content. It's not going to be home renovations. It's not going to be cooking show. It's not going to be like Wall Street news. You turn on to ESPN to see sports content. And similarly with my content, I make personal finance content that is both entertaining and educational. So that's what every single one of my pieces of content is about. And if I ever strayed away from that, my viewers would be like, what am I doing here? And you have to realize that people, I think you brought this up in the episode with Nate, but people don't follow you for the content you've already made. They follow you for the content that you're promising to make them in the future. So if all of your content is the same, it's uniform, it tells the story, and it shows the exact format that all of your contents can be made in, they're more likely to follow you if they want to see that type of content in the future. And then the second one was making videos with the viewer in mind. So every single video I make, I ask myself, why would someone watch this? Like, what value would someone get out of watching this? Because I realize that people's time is their most valuable asset, because like the old saying goes, you can get everything back, but time, you can never earn time back. So if someone watches one of my videos, even if they're only like 30 to 60 seconds long, they're dedicating a portion of their day, a portion of their life to watching content that I made for them. So I want to make sure they end that experience feeling good about what they just watched, instead of being like, oh, why did I just watch this? So every single video has a point. It has a truth, a piece of value that I start before I even script the entire thing off with, like, okay, this is what I want the person to learn after watching my video. And I'm sure every single one of my pieces of content has that. And then last up is consistency. Early on in my career as a creator, I think I was like 3 or 4 months in, I had the opportunity to jump on a call with one of the more successful finance creators at the time. And he's still one of the most successful finance creators out there. And I asked him, like, man, how did you break through? Like, how did you end up getting your couple 100,000 followers? How did you end up getting this consistency with your views? And he said, Nick, man, I sat down and I promised myself I would post one video every single day for 90 days. And he did. And he gained like 200,000 followers off of that. I was like, oh, cool. I should do that too, because not only will I get more like hits at bat, like more chances to hit a home run with my piece of content, because the more you put out there, obviously, the more likely one will get pushed out to a lot of people. Just the more you iterate, the more you make more and more content, the better you're going to get. Just like anything else in life, repetition is good for building expertise at something. So by the end of that 90-day sprint that I did, I probably gained, I think I started with around 50,000-ish followers, somewhere in that range. And I probably ended with like 200-ish thousand just by posting consistently every single day and making sure every single video was better than the last. And if you are thinking about creating short form video, if you do those three things, it's going to be really hard not to see some level of success.
So, wow. First of all, the three parts that is great. Those will be in the show notes, I guarantee. And, the crazy thing, that's on one platform, right? That 150,000 follower gain is just on TikTok at the time, correct?
Yeah, because TikTok was the only show in town at that point. There was no other show from video platform. So yeah, that was just on TikTok.
Oh man, that is nuts. Well, I'll tell you what, we are going to jump in and take a look at some of this video. We're going to pull it apart and we're going to share our screen here in just a second. All right, so we got a video up now. We've got your TikTok profile. So I'm kind of looking off screen here, but you all will see this straight on if you are on video. If you're on audio, I'm seeing Nick's handsome face, and he's got 1.1 million followers on TikTok and a mere 11.8 million likes. I'm sorry, man. This is patently insane, those numbers. And the idea that you grabbed 150,000 followers in just 90 days by being consistent, I don't think that's everything. I'm just saying. I think that it has to do with the quality of your content, which we're going to look at now. So this is a video you had suggested, kind of, I guess, how to beat the tax man, which just smells viral when you read the title here, right? So we're gonna play this, and I'm gonna make sure my sound's on so everybody can hear this, and we're gonna break this down. We're gonna break down like first frame, why it matters, what the concept was, how you came up with title, this thumbnail, does that even matter on TikTok? I don't know. It does on YouTube. And then we'll talk about the elements of the story. But first, we're just going to listen to this thing. And on audio, you'll hear it. And there's plenty going on in audio, so don't worry. You'll get a lot out of it.
It's tax time, pay up. I don't owe you anything. Yes, you do. You made $100K this year. I did, but this was used to buy a new business vehicle. This was how much my business paid to rent my home for 14 days. This for travel expenses and car mileage. And because my business is an S-Corp, 20% of its net income is tax-free. All right, just give me what's left over. Hold up. I also own a rental property and can claim this much in depreciation, even though my property increased in value. Okay, too many people are following Nick.
I just love this. And for those of you who are on audios, Nick's got wigs on and is playing a character, obviously, because that doesn't exactly sound like the lovable Nick that you're listening to right now. He's actually played two characters. He's playing the business owner and the tax man, which is, first of all, conceptually, this is fantastic. Where'd you come up with the idea to do all these characters?
Oh gosh. I mean, the idea for the characters in general came pretty early on. I saw other creators doing it, especially in like the comedy niche, where there'd be like comedian characters playing like different, like 5-10 different characters in the same video. And I played around with these kind of skit styles. I saw some other finance creators doing it as well. And I mixed those in along with like the more traditional, like, oh, I'm just going to hold my phone up and speak into it style of content. And I just found that 10 times out of 10, skit style videos, they retained the viewer the longest. People enjoy the skit styles the most. And I think especially because I'm in a kind of like a traditionally boring topic like finance, these skit styles just make learning about finance so much more entertaining, so much more fun, but you still end the video getting that piece of value. So it's the best way to kind of act as a vehicle to impart my knowledge into my audience.
Right. And the knowledge is totally legit. I mean, first off, you're an actual CFP. So this isn't some kid who read a textbook and then is giving you some crazy scheme. This is the real deal. But it's packaged right in such an entertaining way. So, for this one in particular, where does this one come from? I mean, obviously, conceptually, emotionally, you want to beat the tax man. So there's kind of an emotional hook here because everybody wants to get over on the IRS. But past that, talk to me about how this kind of a video, and this one in particular, came together. Like, where's the idea come from? How do you go after it?
Yeah, so I generally make two different kinds of content. one kind of skews more towards the viral side of things. So like this one, I made this one knowing it had the potential to get a lot of reach. And the second style is more like in-depth explainers. Like I made a video on RSUs, like I think 2 or 3 months ago, that is well over 1 million views. And it's more of a like boring by my standards. Like it's still an entertaining skit style video, but it goes a lot more in the weeds. Like, okay, here's how vesting works. Here's how you tax when RSUs are vest. Like all that in the weeds stuff. Whereas this one, it's very high level. Basically just making people aware, like, hey, if you're a business owner, there are all these different tax write-offs, et cetera, that you can potentially take advantage of. This video is obviously a little bit of an exaggeration because, I mean, you probably won't end up paying zero in taxes, but maybe it gets into someone's head that like, oh, maybe I could explore using the Augusta rule and talk to my accountant about that if I'm a business owner. Or maybe if I own rental property, I get tax write-offs for that. Awesome. Cool. So really, this one, it did play on that, like the title of the video is how to beat the tax man. Like you said, that's something that everybody wants to do, which is what puts this in that viral category of video. So it's very broadly appealing. I don't know of anyone that doesn't want to beat the tax man. Whereas with more in-depth videos that I make, like how do RSUs work, that's only going to apply to a certain segment of my audience.
Right. And this first frame, I think is really interesting. First of all, it's a totally ridiculous look on your face, which I love. And you've got this wig going. And then you've got this red thing up at the top, sort of an asterisk with, it says tax man and a little devil face, which is great. And then you're rubbing your hands together and it says it's tax time. So you've told a story in this first frame. How much thought goes into that?
A ton. I mean, the first frame in the first like 3 to 5 seconds of video alone, that's where 90% of your effort should go. Because if someone isn't hooked by those first couple seconds of your video, they're not going to watch the other 95% of your video. So yeah, a lot. And one hack that I use in basically every single video that I make is that movement gets attention. So basically every video I have, you'll see I kind of like storm into the screen, whether it's happy or like evil, like this tax man figure, or just like waving. If you impart movement in the very first part of your screen, it's a lot more likely to get someone's attention.
Yeah, and as I think about it, because obviously we've got this freeze framed right now, but when I look at this, you can see the movement, right? Like this is clearly in the middle of something happening, which for me, and I suppose this is a point, immediately makes me want to see, okay, what happens when this thing goes? Now on TikTok, the way the platform works, obviously when you swipe, it goes, right? So it's not like some platforms where some of the discovery you get, like on a YouTube Shorts, if you're on the mobile app, it works the same way. But sometimes on the web, a short is frozen, right? So somebody has to choose from the first frame to go in there. So clearly that matters. So in the first 5 seconds of this, we get from here to, let's see.
It's tax time, pay up. I don't owe you anything. Yes, you do. You made $100K this year. I did, but this was used to buy a new business vehicle.
So you get from it's tax time, pay up to I did, but, and then now you're into second 6. And so that sounds to me like you had there's a couple back and forth, and now there's an open story gap. Is this guy going to get over on the tax man? Am I getting this right?
Exactly. Yeah, it just builds up that curiosity because the tax man says like, oh, you made this much money last year. And the guy says, yeah, but I still don't owe you any taxes. So that creates a huge curiosity gap where the viewer, like, they're basically compelled to watch more. Otherwise, they'll have no idea. And they're like, oh, did I just miss on some way I could potentially save on my own taxes?
Right. Wait, but how? And you got to keep going. And now this is only 28 seconds long, this video. And this one, what would we see for it's got 11,000 likes. This one's got also millions of views. I forget what the exact numbers are on the total number of views here, but it's in the millions.
It was like 2 million on YouTube, and I think this might have been. I repost content every once in a while. I think this might be a reposted video on TikTok because I think the original one got 6 figures worth of likes. So yeah, it's been viewed many times.
That's just so crazy. It's so crazy. And then from there, how do you like to think about things like pacing and continuing to open little story gaps? Because I've heard from other creators that even in a 30-second video. And Jenny Hoyas, who, if you don't know who she is like amazing creator at creating 30-second to 60-second videos that get watched by literally hundreds of millions of people. And when she talks about it, she talks about sort of the story elements and these simple story structures that she does, but it's about retaining some story gaps all the way through. I'm curious if you think about that in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I try to impart as much story as I can into my content. It is a little bit tougher because it is way more educational than story driven. Like in this one, you could say the baseline story here is there's an evil tax man, and then smart business owner knows how to evade him. That's basically the extent that the story goes. I think what I think about a lot more than story is just maximizing the value per second of my content, because I make educational content. People watch it to get value out of it, not necessarily to be entertained, though that's obviously something I want to sprinkle on top of there. So if there's any word that doesn't drive the value forward, I cut it out. If there's any sentence, I cut it out. Like, there should not be a single part of downtime in the video where the viewer gets bored and they're left wanting more. Because if they do that when they're watching short form video, all they have to do is scroll up on their screen and they're fed literally the most entertaining content in the history of humanity. So you want to make sure you can keep people's attention, and a good way to do that is just maximizing that value per second.
Right. Now, I did hear, on the story side of things, I did hear someone I knew way back when, Sean Puri, who's really interesting creator. A different style, not video, mostly written. But he talked about story a lot in How I Write podcast. And I thought what he said was really interesting. He said, story is nothing more than intention and obstacle, right? So what do you want to do? What's in your way? And then the stakes come from how you feel about it. And when I think about this video, I mean, the storyline really, really is, I want to, get myself in a position where I pay less taxes. I want to pay less taxes, but there's the tax man standing in my way. And so for me, the open gaps are then, well, how do you beat the tax man? And for every piece here, and there's a couple of different things that you share during this, right? That you're revealing these additional ways that you beat the tax man, which I think is fascinating. So while it's not traditional story driven, like there's, it's not the hero's journey, it does feel like there are story elements even in this 28 seconds. So I think it's really, really fascinating. Plus there's this, to your idea about motion, there's so much happening on the screen, and you're showing up from different angles, right? For each character, different things happening. You write in this view, you're showing dollar bills. So it's got a lot going on. So there's visual elements to the story that also raise curiosity. How much do you think about the props and those kind of things?
A pretty decent amount. I mean, I have a set number of props, wigs, outfits I usually rotate between, and they've basically all come up because at some point I was like, oh, it'd be really engaging or like really fun if I included one of these in a video at some point. And it just, like, for example, this prop money I have here, these are not real $100 bills. I would never keep that much cash on me, but they help add movement and kind of drive that story of the video, because it's a nice visual way to show, like, oh, here's all this money this guy made last year. Oh, he's putting it back in his pocket. He gets to keep it. He doesn't pay it in taxes, and just helps the movement. Yes, I definitely don't think they're necessary for everyone making content, but especially for skit style content, they're very, very nice to have, and they really help you act as like kind of a crutch and like what to do with your hands kind of thing throughout the video.
Yeah, it just works, and your profile across all platforms is kind of littered with content that really went, and so you've clearly developed a real skill here, which is pretty amazing. And I'm curious though, you're a CFP, right? Certified Financial Planner. So I don't know, but the last time I checked, this wasn't on the CFP certificate exam. So how'd you get started? And let's zoom back. I presume you started as a CFP, and that was kind of where this. I'd love to hear your story and just tell me about sort of how we got here.
Yeah, let's actually zoom back to high school for 1 second. So at the end of my freshman year of high school, I actually started a YouTube channel. Unfortunately, it was not in the finance niche because I had no idea. I did not know anything about money at the time. But I grew that YouTube channel over the next like 3-4 years, basically until I left for college, and earned enough money just off of YouTube AdSense to pay for a good chunk of college. So I knew that content was something that it was an industry back at the time. I did not think it would go anywhere, which is why I went to college, went and got my degree in finance, and went and started working as a financial advisor. But I had a really fun time doing it. So fast forward to the summer of 2020. Obviously, we all know what's happening in 2020. We did not have a lot to do outside of our home. We were all like sitting inside, really bored. And I kind of had this realization that at that point, I'd been working for 3 years as a financial tax advisor to high net worth individuals. So people that if they didn't get our advice, they would be completely financially set for life. But the advice we were giving them was obviously very valuable and did help them make and save a lot of money. But these are people that were in completely different tax brackets than me growing up, than my parents, than basically every single person I knew in my hometown of Farmington, Minnesota, which is as small as it sounds. And I'd realized over this course of time being an advisor that I had learned a lot of information that would be very, very valuable to younger me and to even my parents, and like basically everyone I knew would benefit from this information that I had learned this last couple of years working. And even someone that was a finance student in school, I was taught about corporate finance. I didn't know anything about personal finance. So I was like, oh, I'm even learning new stuff as a finance major. You think they teach us this stuff. So that kind of mixed together with the boringness that the pandemic lockdowns caused. And what really was kind of the kick in the pants for me to get started was I went on this 7-day hiking trip out in the Sierra Nevada mountain ranges, like out in California, where we thru hiked it. So we started on the west side, ended up on the east side, completely walked through the entire mountain range, had zero cell service, zero internet service the entire time. So I just had a lot of time really alone with my thoughts to think about what I wanted to do with my life. And I realized that even though I loved working with my current clients at my advisory job, it just wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. And I really wanted to help people that were like me growing up. And I thought back to that time in high school where I was making my YouTube content. And I was like, oh, that was the most fun I've ever had, like, quote unquote, working my entire life. Like, I love putting time into a piece of content and then presenting it to the world and having it being seen by potentially thousands or potentially even millions of people. And at that time, that was the exact time where this new app called TikTok was kind of coming out of the scene that made content creation a lot more approachable. Especially from the standpoint of building your initial audience, because as someone that built up my YouTube audience, I think I had like 70,000 subscribers or something when I eventually shut it down or just stopped posting on it. It was really, really hard getting that initial, like even 100, 200, like 500,000 people to start caring about my content and start subscribing and following me and engaging with my videos, just because long form is so hard discoverability wise, especially back then it was. Whereas TikTok, it was much more approachable in the content creation side of things. Like, oh, the videos are only 30 to 60 seconds usually. I mean, they're like 15 to 60 if you really want to go down there. So it's a lot easier to make the content. TikTok's algorithm doesn't care how many followers you have. Even to this day, I have 1 million plus followers on TikTok. If I post a video that's bad, it could be seen by like 2,000 people, which is still a lot of people, but it's nothing compared to the total audience I have, especially if you post that same video across many other platforms. So all that rambling goes on to say that it was a perfect point in time where TikTok made content creation a lot easier than ever. I had information that I wanted to share with the world, and I wanted to help as many people as possible. Whereas at my day job as an advisor, I was helping a couple hundred, like not a couple hundred, but like 100 plus people with their rich people problems, to put it in without lack of a better word. But I really wanted to help the world at large build better like personal finance knowledge.
That's fantastic. Because I think that encapsulates a lot of the power of being a creator. On this show, we've talked a lot about how being a creator can drive leads for your business and how really media is kind of the great equalizer now. And where traditional marketing isn't working for advisors, people who know what they're doing on social media are excelling. They're the ones growing their practices organically. But the media reach goes way beyond that. And your ability to teach and help literally millions of people is just something you can't do as a traditional financial advisor. It's just incredibly powerful what you can do as a creator. You really open up financial education to an audience of people that, frankly, traditional financial advisors can't service at all. But you made this leap, right? You made this change. So what told you there was a business here? I mean, certainly some creators monetize their audiences, but you chose a slightly different path. So how'd you get from CFP, serving high net worth clients, to I run an agency doing creative work, et cetera? That there's a journey there somewhere.
There is. It's a very long journey. I would say when I first started thinking about it as a career in general was back in September of 2021. I attended this conference called FinCon down in Austin, Texas, where this was the first conference post-COVID and the first time where there were people like making real livings off of short-form video content in the finance space. So at that conference was the first time I met like 25 of what felt like my closest friends, because we all followed each other on TikTok and we all saw each other's content. We all supported it. We all met in person, and there were some of them that were really killing it. Like they were getting millions of views back then, which was a lot. And they were getting approached by many different brands. They're like, oh, can you help us run our social media campaigns? And can you make social media content for us? And they were making a lot of money. They were making more in a month than my parents made in a year. And I was like, oh, okay. Even if I don't get anywhere close to that, like there is some sort of financial stability here if I did want to just go all in on just educating as many people as possible. So fast forward, went full time, basically directly after that, after speaking with all those creators. And since then, I've worked on major brand campaigns with gigantic financial institutions like Fidelity, Discover Bank, Ally Bank, bunch of different credit unions, bunch of different investment platforms. You name it. Basically, all of these large financial institutions have discovered that short form video is where their future customers live, and they need people that are fluent in like the language of short form video in order to put their brand in front of that audience, which is why I ended up starting N2 Content Marketing. As you mentioned, now I have an agency with Nate, another super successful CFP / content creator, where we've seen that the big financial institutions, they've recognized the power of short form video, but for whatever reason, financial advisors really just they haven't embraced it nearly as much as we thought they would have over these last couple of years. So what we do is we decided to help financial advisors, mostly independent advisors. That's basically all we've worked with so far. Skip the complete learning curve when it comes to posting short form video content. So what took us years to learn, they can learn in a span of like a month or two, just so they can get that head start and actually start driving real business results for their firm. Because at the end of the day, you aren't selling the services you provide to your clients. You're selling yourself. You're selling yourself as a person. If people know, like, and trust you, and they trust you to provide value to them, which short form video is a great way to convey that, then they're going to end up scheduling calls with you. And instead of these being like cold calls where you're reaching out to people and be like, hey, look, I'm a financial advisor. Here's what I do. Here's why you should trust me. You jump on the phone and they're already sold. They're like, all right, how can we work together? Like I've watched your videos for many combined hours, and I feel like I already know exactly who you are, and I completely trust you. Here's this financial thing that came with my life. Now's the time I want to reach out and work with an advisor. Why not reach out to you? Why would I reach out to like the guy that works at Edward Jones down the street when I feel like he's just going to try to sell me life insurance? Why not reach out to this advisor that I've seen every single day providing me value on my feed?
And that last bit that you talked about, this relationship that gets developed via video, every creator I've had on has talked about that in the exact same way. You know, the fancy word is it's a parasocial relationship. But the bottom line is, by doing all of this video content and sharing it with your audience, when an audience member shows up and says, I'd really like to work with you, and they talk to you live for the first time ever, they, not you so much, but they feel like they know you. The like, know, and trust already happened before they ever showed up. And that's a complete game changer. If you think about the single hardest thing a financial advisor has to do is build trust. And it happens in what seems like an instant from the perspective of the advisor, but it could be over months and years because the content's doing the work for you. So it's quite powerful. And yes, you have a content agency, and I know, from talking with Nate a lot about what you do. I think what's really interesting to me is I've started to run into your work and your clients' work around the web, and I can see them being successful as a result of the influence you've had, and where you've got clients online, a woman named Sarah that I connect with on LinkedIn, and they've done a bunch of video work recently. And there's a bunch of story-driven video that they've done. It's very clear right out of your playbook. And they've got a very different style. It's very authentic to them, but it's very clear that you coach them. And it's amazing how much I felt like I got to know them just through that experience. So, we're going to go in and talk a little bit more about your process and process with clients, et cetera. But I want to talk a little bit about something you said earlier, where you take the same video and you post it across platforms as kind of reusable content, which is obviously a smart idea. But what I've also heard from many content creators is that the platforms all behave quite differently. So when I think about short form platforms, I think about, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, a little bit of Instagram for Reels, and there are corollaries elsewhere. You could do that on LinkedIn, but I think TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram are kind of the big three. Talk to me about the differences between the platform and how videos perform differently. And then, when we get into it, we'll take a look at a video on YouTube Shorts and we'll kind of compare the experience. But talk to me about, from the creator's point of view, what's the difference between those platforms?
Yeah, they each have their own little nuances. At the end of the day, though, like if a video is good, it will probably get reach on every single platform. So if you're just trying to start making content and you're worried about, oh, should I post here? Should I post there? Should I post this? No, stop worrying about that. If a video is good, it will be seen. But with that being said, there are differences. So TikTok and Instagram, they're like merging in styles very closely. Instagram just announced like 2 weeks ago, they're basically redoing their algorithm to act basically just like TikTok. And I'm guessing they're doing that because, TikTok might be going away at some point. But even if not, it's obviously been proven to be a successful model. So what that means is currently Instagram is a platform that weights your followers way heavier than any other platform. So because I have like 216-ish thousand followers on there, if I post a piece of content, it will be seen by at least like 10% of them. If it's a bad piece of content, it'll be seen by at least 10% of them. And then obviously has the chance to go much, much higher. Whereas, like I mentioned earlier on TikTok, if I have 1 million something followers on there, if I post a bad piece of content, the algorithm's just not going to show it to more than like 2,000 people. And those 2,000 people will all have followed me and all have said that, hey, this is a bad piece of content. I only watched 2 seconds of it, then scroll. That'll tell the algorithm it's bad. What Instagram announced is they're going to move more towards that model. So it's very good for newer creators because it means you don't have to build that following before you can start to get your reach. You can have that following immediately if you post a really good video. Like Nate, who I'm pretty sure he told you about his first video on your podcast with him. His first video on TikTok got over 1 million views and built up like tens of thousands of followers for him. I unfortunately was not that lucky, but that is the power that these purely algorithm-based like video push out models. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, it's an interest graph. So when I talk about, so you hear a lot of the creators talk about this. Instagram, TikTok clearly is purely an interest graph. In some ways, YouTube Shorts as well, and YouTube, generally speaking, it's because search driven is an interest graph, whereas Instagram, it sounds like, is much more of a network graph.
Yeah. And
like LinkedIn is very much a network graph. So it's all about who you know, and then it kind of goes from there. Whereas TikTok is, if it's good and it meets that need and that interest, 100%. It's just going to push the video
YouTube
out.
To touch on them for a little bit, it's very, very similar where it's much more interest driven than it is follower driven. The one cool thing about YouTube is that the content shelf life on there is so much longer than I've seen on any other platform. Like, for example, last month was a slow month for videos because a lot were over 60 seconds long, so they didn't meet YouTube's threshold, so I didn't post them on there. And I just didn't make as many because I was traveling and then working on N2. So I was like, I'll just put my Nick Talks Money content to the side. So I only posted 2 videos on there last month. And I still got 1.2 million total views. And a lot of those views were from videos I posted in 2023. Like not late 2023, like mid and early 2023, because YouTube has categorized those as videos that people are interested in. So every couple months I see on the analytics chart, if I look at each of these videos, like, oh, there's a huge step up, and it was shown to another 200,000 people. So YouTube content lives for much longer. And I think that comes from them being such a strong platform when it comes to search compared to the other social platforms, especially.
Right, exactly. So it's one of the reasons why it's such a strategic platform for so many businesses is exactly that shelf life. And once you've got something that really works there in your niche and connecting to a particular idea, YouTube's like, that's great content. And there's some recency bias, but they'll keep showing stuff for years and years and years.
For sure.
Which is amazing in terms of the value and the shelf life of that content. Now, talking about how YouTube works, we've got another video here. I'd love to talk about this. And now this is also a video that's been reposted on multiple platforms. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the same Beat the Taxman video.
Yeah. So, and I think, we want this other. This is the one we were going to take a look at. So, one, you do in the mobile app. Obviously, you have a very similar experience to TikTok. But if we look at your channel, one of the things that's very different is the way that a lot of people discover YouTube videos is in these suggested for you and for you, these areas where lots and lots of different content is shown together, and you've got these static images, and then shorts, right? So you've got both long form and short form all in the same place. And for those of you who are on audio, I've just kind of scrolled through the various thumbnails and then got to shorts. So that's one of the many ways that you discover it. Also, you discover it via TikTok style. So in the TikTok style, it's isolated, kind of like the others. And let's take a look and listen. So there's a lot of things about this that's pretty similar.
I bet I'll make more money as a banker than you will as a fisherman. You think so? Let's see who's richer in 20 years. Already a quarter of the way to $1 million net worth. How's your little fishing operation going? Good, and you're right, it's still little. Every day I sleep in, fish a bit, hang with my family, then stroll to the village in the evenings to eat good food and play guitar with my friends. Ha, you're leaving so much money on the table by not expanding your operation. In 6 more years, I should be worth $5 million and I can finally stop working these 80-hour weeks. What will you do then? Ideally, I'd move to a small coastal village where I'd sleep late, fish a little, hang out with my family, then stroll to the village in the evenings where I'd eat good food and play guitar with my friends. You can dream, right?
All right. So this is on repeat. Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna hit pause here. Lot going on in there. Plus, by the way, I love the music. I don't know where you found that, but that was fantastic ambiance for that video. So let's talk a little bit about this guy. And I don't have the controls to kind of get this to park at the first frame, but you've got a similar first frame consideration on this video, right?
Yeah, it's same thing, movement driven. And then also I incorporated kind of a challenge element in here. So I bet I'll make more money as a banker than you will as a fisherman. And that kind of creates a question in someone's head because, like, yeah, duh. Why is he making this video? Like, yeah, bankers should make more. But then it goes into the old, like, I can't take credit for the story. This is like the old, like, banker versus fisherman parable about how maybe you shouldn't focus on working so hard now for some distant goal in the future. But that, yeah, it's a lot more story driven than a lot of my content, which is probably why it got 11 million views on YouTube.
Yeah. So stop for a second.
Yeah.
Just let everyone let that register. This video got 11 million views on YouTube. Like that's a bananas number. And it's not an original storyline in the sense that you grabbed it from a parable, but that's powerful, right? That we all get inspiration from other places. And then you repurpose that to deliver your message. So to me, that just shows how much opportunity there is to do this, right? This isn't, being Michelangelo and coming up with these original things and suddenly you've carved the David. This is coming up with ideas that work, that have resonated in maybe another context and repurposing them. And then, this too, a challenge, the challenge you talked about, I bet I'll make more than you. That's a it's a formula for a hook. It works. It's why it's a good formula. So it's important, I think, for everybody to understand that professional creators use these formulas themselves. It's how they become popular and why they repeatedly are delivering really successful videos. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Follow successful models. And then what made you come up with that? Like, did you read the parable? Did you stumble on something? How do you get there?
Yeah, I think I saw it on Twitter, and to your point, I did other videos where I kind of had that challenge hook that did very, very well. And I was like, okay, this is a very, very well-known, very popular parable. It may not be well-known with my audience, so why don't I put my own spin on it using the challenge format and using my trademark like skit style to make it a little bit more fun to make a video and put it in front of my audience.
Yeah, and it just lands. And I'm curious, when you're shooting, and we're going to talk more about process and managing the overall process, but when you're shooting this, how are you doing your script? A lot of advisors I know that we talk with, and other service professionals that are trying to do video, try and do scripted, and they sound like, my name is John Prendergast, and I think, they sound very robotic, and it's very tough. These are clearly very carefully scripted videos. So how do you do it? What's your approach to scripting versus outlining versus winging it?
Yeah. Okay. So my entire script process, I start, like I mentioned earlier, with the value in mind. So what is the overall topic of the video, and what do I want the viewer to end the video feeling or having learned? So that's number one. Then I usually break the video out into a couple bullet points. So here are a couple key topics I can hit. So like on that how to beat the tax man video, okay, section 179 deductions, Augusta rule, whatever the last one was. So having those key points framed out, those key pieces of value framed out. And then I basically, from there, I try to think of other videos I've done that have had successful hooks and like how those were formatted, and then see how those could potentially translate over to this video and see which one works best with this style of content and like how I want to convey this information. Do the hook first. I spend the majority of my time on that hook because, again, if no one watches your hook, if no one's compelled by it, if no one's like hooked by your hook, then they won't watch the rest of your video. The rest of it won't matter. And then I basically go in, I try to make each of my lines pretty concise as possible, so I'm not rambling and it's not taking more than like 3 to 5 seconds to switch between that and the next scene. Maximize value per second, and to make it sound like I'm naturally speaking for the most part. I think part of it's just practice. I mean, right away, I did sound absolutely terrible. It sounded like I was reading off a script in my first couple of videos, but the more you do, the better you're going to get at just becoming a writer that writes in your own natural voice. And then how I do it when I'm actually recording the content, a lot of people read off of teleprompters, and that is where that robotic sound comes from. I don't, because I have these bullet pointed scripts that are each like a sentence or 2 sentences long. It's really easy for me to just turn the camera on, look over at my computer screen, be like, okay, here's this line I have to say, turn around, say it in my natural voice after memorizing it. If the clip is good, turn back, memorize the next line, and then rinse and repeat until the entire video is done.
Yeah. Well, your natural character's voice.
Exactly. Yeah. It depends if I'm doing evil tax man or something.
Right. Which is fun. So even delivering this level of energy, and that's another thing I think about your videos that's so great, is the high level of energy you deliver is one of the few things you can transmit, right? If somebody talks like this, and if you talked like you're announcing a golf match, I'm pretty sure no one would watch. That kind of a yeah. thing. But if you're like, so here's what's going on, and you've got all this energy in your voice, and that just comes through. So what's interesting about your process is, think about this, folks. So Nick's reading a thing, and then he's turning and firing the energy at that line, right, in that voice, etc. And that does take practice. We all suck at the beginning, and hey, I don't know, maybe I suck still. Who knows? But y'all be the judge. But it just takes willing to be terrible over and over again until you're not, and eventually it happens that you're not. I talked to one guy, Pete Matthew, who's a YouTuber. Hundreds of thousands of subscribers, so kind of a mid-sized channel, but really successful in the UK. And he'd been doing it for 11 years before anything took off. And he's super natural now. And he was actually natural then, but there was a lot of other aspects about it. You just have to kind of keep at it. But now remember, everybody, if you don't want to spend 11 years doing this, you can learn by calling Nick and Nate. They'll actually help you out. Trust me on this. They do a great job. So that's your process for the individual video recording. how do you manage the overall process? Because you're doing so many videos, et cetera. You said you've got a Notion workflow that you do. I'm curious, like I'd love to see that, and maybe you could share your screen and we could talk about that Notion workflow. And for those of you who don't know, Notion is the new cool kid on the block. This is not a Notion commercial, but so many people are using it nowadays, and it's a pretty amazing free-form organizational tool, project management, content management, and it's got some really cool features. One of the features that I've seen that works really well is for creators like Nick and his partner Nate and a bunch of others who want to provide some value to prospects and customers. You can share Notion templates and people can copy them to their own Notion workbook, which is phenomenal. And maybe I can entice Nick into sharing some of his content magic. Who knows? Maybe there'll be something dropped in the show notes to share. But what we're looking at is a columnar setup here. For those of you on audio, and you've got a bunch of statuses, right? Something idea to film, ready to edit, in edit review, and to post. Walk us through this process and sort of how you manage all of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it didn't start off disorganized, unfortunately. Back in the early days, I'd basically write out all my video ideas in my notes app on my phone and then just try to keep them somewhat organized and let them rip and record, edit, post, etc. It was way less organized than it is now, but especially since bringing editors onto my team, so having people to outsource my editing for me, it's just a lot easier to have this set up in a very transparent way where, one, I can keep track of all the ideas that I have, and two, the editors know, like, hey, when I move a video over to the to edit column, it's their turn to edit something. And then when they move something over to the edit review column, it just makes it a lot easier for me to know, like, oh, okay, that's something that I should review to make sure that if there's any changes I want made, I can put those in there. Or if it's good to go, I can approve it and we can move it over to the to post column. So it just helps to systematize things quite a bit. And the more systematized something is, the easier it is to stay consistent with it, the easier it is to just make a lot of content, which is what the stage of content creation I'm in is.
So along those lines, so when you drop it in the to edit, getting a little detailed, does the editor get a notification, and is it linked to the original video somewhere on Google Drive or on Dropbox or something like that?
Exactly. Yeah. So whenever I move something over to the to edit column, they get notified as soon as I assign the task to them. So thankfully, with me playing around with it right now, they aren't actually getting notified. Otherwise, I'm like, Nick, what is going on here? Where's these videos you told me we're ready to edit? But once it gets assigned to them, they get a notification. I let them know in Slack too, just because I'm paranoid and I want to make sure they know when stuff is ready. And I include a link to the Descript file. So Descript is an editing software that I'm not going to do a whole sales pitch for Descript here, but it makes it really easy to clip the files before I send them off to my editor, because when I'm recording my content, it is very, very rare. I would say this has actually never happened where I record a video in one take and every single scene was perfect and I only recorded one scene each time. If that was the case, I just send it straight to the editors as a file. But I usually record multiple takes for each scene because either I don't say the line with the right energy that I wanted, or I mess up a word, which I do a lot, which you will do a lot if you start making short form video content. I get frustrated, but also it basically, all I have to say is I put videos into this platform called Descript. I chop them, so I choose the clips that I want the editors to actually edit, so they don't have to do that themselves. And then I share it with them through that, and I also send a link or share a link with them through this Notion board when I move it over to the to edit column.
That's great. And then just an idea for advisors who are watching, bear in mind, you could set this up and also include another set of columns for compliance, right? If you've got a compliance review process, you could take a video, maybe it's a finished video with a link to that video on Dropbox or Drive or some other file sharing system. You drop it in, you assign it to the compliance person, it would notify them. And then, you've got a way to sort of work through the workflow of working with compliance, which doesn't need to be a hindrance, right? If compliance is your excuse, you're lying to yourself. It's bullshit. I know many, many, many creators who are CFPs, who are working for broker dealers, who get it done, and it can be done, and it can be made easy. And this is just another way to make that workflow straightforward for yourself. So this is a great tool. When you're doing this, these ideas, when you're managing those ideas, you get kind of a headline necessarily. Do you detail out the idea in Notion, the main points and sort of kind of the script preview, if you will, or does that level of detail happen elsewhere?
Yeah. So how I use my Notion at least is I have the title of the video here, and then basically I write out the script and put any ideas down in the actual description box of the Notion. So yeah, I detail it further in here. Let's see, for these ideas, I might not have very much. Yeah, I might just have like the start of a video, like anything in the idea column was not fully fleshed out. These are the ideas that come to me like while I'm walking my dog, while I'm like heating up my lunch or something, and I just want to make sure I have a place to capture them. So when I go and have a like dedicated sit down session to do all my scripts, I have this idea bank I can already pull from, and it just makes it a lot easier to pound out a couple scripts than me having to sit down and think of ideas as well as actually turn those ideas all into scripts at the same sitting.
Right. It's such a great tool, and it's really well set up. And I don't know, maybe we can get a version of this that's kind of a copyable template that everybody else could use. But what do you feel like you've learned about shooting short form video? Like, what would you want to tell everybody about doing this, and the power of it?
Oh man, I mean, the power we've already talked about. I mean, I've just been making short form videos from my first bedroom, now home office, over the last like 3+ years, and I've reached 350 million plus people, which is absolutely insane. I don't even want to think about how much it would cost to reach that many people with paid ads, probably hundreds of thousands, if not many millions of dollars. So just the impact that's had for me and my business has been absolutely life-changing. I've been able to do this stuff full-time for the past, like since 2021, like I mentioned, when I went full-time. And the things to keep in mind when making content is, one, obviously just start. I mean, none of us are good at the start. If you want to scroll back down and embarrass me, you can watch my very first couple of videos on TikTok, especially. I think they're all uploaded on there. Not sure about the other platforms because they weren't around yet, but on TikTok, especially, my first like 20, 30, 40, 50 videos, I'm embarrassed by looking back and watching them. But that's good, because that means that I've gotten better since I've made those videos. If I wasn't embarrassed, it'd mean my videos would still be bad and I probably wouldn't have a following. I probably wouldn't be getting views, etc. So just start. And then keep those 3 things in mind from earlier. Have your content consistency so people know exactly what to expect when they go to your page. As someone that works in finance, presumably, if you're watching this podcast or listening to it, you're probably going to be skewing more towards educational, personal finance content. Make sure that is very clear in all of the content that you make. And make sure every single piece of content you make has value if your goal is to provide value to people. Obviously, provide value in every single piece of content. It sounds obvious, but it's amazing how many advisors we work with at N2 where they make a video that doesn't really have a point. Like, you kind of see they were kind of like going somewhere with it, but not exactly. Or even if they did, it wasn't speaking to the right audience. Like, maybe they're speaking to other advisors versus their ideal client, which is a huge difference, because other advisors, unless you have like some sort of B2B advisor offering, they're not your target market. You should be making content for them. You should be making content for your ideal client. And speaking of that, the power of short form video, which is why I am so all in, like I'm 110% in on short form video, is these algorithms are so strong. It doesn't matter who your target client is, who your ideal prospect is. If you speak to them in your videos over the course of a couple videos, it might not happen immediately, but over the course of a couple videos, the algorithms are smart enough to put your content in front of people who will get value from it. So if you're speaking to your ideal prospect, it will be shown to them no matter what platform you're on. And last thing, just be consistent. Like I said, you're not going to get better if you don't make more videos. Make as many as you can. A big thing, a big piece of value that helps a lot of people, that really does help me stay consistent, because no one has time to sit down and make a video every single day. I stopped doing that 3 years ago. I can't do that. What has really helped me is batching content. So setting aside like maybe one day, maybe even a month, not even a week, one day a month, where you sit down, you write out maybe 8 video scripts. So that's enough to post 2 videos per week. And then the next day or two, block out 2, 3, 4 hours, however long you think it's going to take you, to just sit down and record all of those videos. So you have an entire month's worth of content done by only filming once in a month. I'm on that cadence right now with Nick Talks Money. I'm on that cadence right now with my N2 content. I just sat down and filmed like 15 pieces of N2 related content a week ago. So now I'm good for the next month or so. So I don't have to worry about allocating that much of my valuable time every single week to making content. I know it's a lot, but it all should help you guys if you want to make short form video.
And something your clients, I guarantee, ask you about, which I know, you do a lot of work in, is conversions, right? The reason an advisor wants to do this is ultimately to get clients. And
Exactly.
And the first objection I've heard about TikTok is, oh, my clients aren't there. Well, I don't know. If you're talking about a video about RSUs, I'm pretty sure a 22-year-old who just graduated college is probably not asking about RSUs. So talk to me about conversion and what you've seen across your client base, and sort of how it's working, and some of the mechanisms that people are using to convert these folks into real leads.
Yeah, to go off of your first point, so my ideal client isn't on whatever, insert platform name here. That's probably wrong, because even on TikTok, which is my youngest platform by far, 20% of my audience is above the age of 50. So there are people there, and my content speaks very basic personal finance. So I'm guessing most 50 plus year olds on the platform probably already know a lot of the stuff I'm talking about. Obviously, some don't, which is why they follow me. But your ideal client is there. The stat we pulled to using like our N2 webinars and everything like that was from 2022. And it said that 244 million people watch an average of 17 hours of short form video every single week. So 244 million people in the US, I forgot to mention that part, in the US watch that much short form video. They will be on a platform. But that's the beautiful thing about being able to diversify the same piece of content across different platforms. So you can post it on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels, which has actually been a very, very successful one for me. LinkedIn, and also like Pinterest, if you want to post on something like that as well. So it kind of diversifies the platform specific risk away and gives you extra avenues to get your clients. Now, speaking of getting clients, we actually just had our like most successful course student by far. He started the course. His name is Nick Marino. He's a CFP and EA, independent financial advisor based out of Columbus, Ohio. He started the course on March 25th. So just this past March 25th, like a month and a half ago from when we were recording this. And he posted his first video, I think like 2 days later, before he even finished getting through the entire course. He had his first coaching call with us like 2 weeks after that. So almost like 3-ish weeks after he started the course. So how we do things is after you finish the course, then you get 2 or 3 coaching calls with Nate and I, so we can kind of dive in and give you specific action items to take your content to the next level, answer your specific questions, etc. So he had his first coaching call with us, and I think it was 4 or 5 days later, whenever his next batch of content went out, he had his first 5-figure view video, and then he got another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and within his first month of making content, he got over 100,000 views just on TikTok. He got another couple thousand across the other platforms. But he had over 500 followers on TikTok, had over 100,000 views. Today he's at like 270-ish thousand views, like 3 or 4 weeks later, and over 1,000 followers. And he posted a video last week where this is usually the video we tell people not to post, but he posted it and it worked really well. It's basically like, hey, a lot of you guys were asking me if I'm a financial advisor. Yes, I am. Here's exactly what I do. Here's how you can work with me, yada, yada, yada. It got over 2,000 likes. It got over 13,000 views, again, just on TikTok. And he was able to schedule 4 client meetings just off of that one video. He closed one before the call we had with him last week. And he's assuming he's going to close the other ones as well based on the information he's got. And he's like, yeah, that was the easiest sale I've ever made. Like we mentioned earlier, they already knew exactly who he was, even as someone that's only been making content for like a month and a half. They still knew, like, and trust him. And they're like, oh, yes, obviously, like, I trust you, Nick. Yeah, let's work together. So obviously we said that was the most successful example we've had so far. But even other advisors that we've started working with, they've also seen success fairly early on. Maybe not quite like the cold success that Marino has had, because those are people that have never heard of him before. But a lot of the clients we worked with, they start posting content across their social channels, and especially on LinkedIn is where they see this bump right away, where they activate their existing audience, where people that maybe they knew from prior jobs or they knew from back in college or like their hometowns or whatever, they just kind of like forgot about you, forgot about them, whatever, people drift away over the years. But they maybe don't realize that you're in a position to potentially help them with their finances. And by you posting this video content, it's a lot easier, or it's a lot harder to miss video content on your feed than it is someone's text post. So if they see your face in their feed, like, oh, that's so-and-so I knew from back in the day. They're a financial advisor. I had no idea. Let me get in touch with them. So activating your existing network is kind of the first effect we see. And then depending on the reach of your videos, obviously Nick got his first client cold in the first month. We typically see between like 4, 5, 6 months is when you really start to get that critical mass where you've made enough content, you're good enough at making content, which is a big part of this, that you start to see a lot more inbound. And it's very, very warm inbound that you don't have to pay for, which a lot of our advisor clients are very, very happy about.
Yeah, amazing. And so one other thing before we bring this home, and it's, what about building audience, right? So one of the key things here is really to build your audience, which is sort of the base of folks that you're eventually going to sell to. What's your advice in terms of thinking about building an audience? Folks that stick with you for the long term. How do you advise your clients on that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things that we mentioned earlier, so we won't dive too deep into them on that aspect. So the content identity, gets people to follow you, and then content consistency, make sure people keep engaging with your content. But I think one thing that advisors specifically have to pay attention of is not selling too much. So we just use an example where our client, Nick Marino, he posted a video that was basically a sales pitch. But even then, when you do sales pitches like that, make it seem like a video that your audience was asking for. So he started off by saying, hey, a lot of you have been asking if I'm a financial advisor, then kind of went into his pitch. What we see a lot of advisors do that we don't work with, and if any do this that we do work with, we tell them, hey, stop this. Like, don't do this. Don't do this. Is every other video has a hard sales pitch. So like, hey, here's schedule a call with me. We'll all, I don't know, however advisors do their sales pitches.
It's so unnatural for you. You can't even do it.
Exactly. It's just so aggressive, and it's so like, there's a lot of assumptions made there. Like you're just assuming that people already know, like, and trust you when you've only made 3 videos and 2 of them have been sales pitches. And you're just kind of assuming that people already know why they should even consider working with you. So what I would say, the biggest part that goes behind building an audience, and especially building an audience that converts, is 90% of your content should be purely to provide value. Don't ask for anything in the majority of your videos. I know this isn't exactly 90%, but like 4 out of 5 pieces of content I make is purely value driven. I don't ask anything from the audience other than maybe like, hey, follow for more, whatever. That's kind of a soft call to action that you don't have to worry too much about doing too much of, because people are kind of used to it. Whereas if you're trying to get them off a platform and like, oh, come work with me, it seems like you're really just running a business page, and people, whenever they see your content come up in their feed in the future, like, oh, I'm not going to watch John's content. He's just trying to sell to me all the time. So really, my biggest piece of advice is don't be too salesy. Sales will happen naturally. And if you do it, if you provide enough value, they'll happen organically.
Right. You have to earn the right to ask. And that comes from delivering a lot of value. I mean, I've heard people talk about ratios of, 50 to 1, 50, well, I don't know what the unit is, but 50 units of value to 1 unit of selling, which maybe is a nice mental model to keep in mind, right? If you make, 50 minutes of video, you might get the permission to do something in 1 of those minutes that's, hey, and by the way, if you're thinking about working with an advisor, come work with me. Maybe you get that, which means if you're doing 60-second videos, make 50 of them. The 51st, maybe you can ask.
Exactly. And even in more salesy videos, I'll use an example of a brand partnership I did with Fidelity. So at the end of the main goal of the video was to promote Fidelity's investing app, like the actual app they launched on the App Store to get people to download on their phones. But the way I did that was the first 80% of the video I made for them was just explaining how fractional share investing works. So like, here's how you can invest in like pieces of a stock instead of just like a full stock. And then at the end, I was like, oh, by the way, if you want an app or a platform you can do this on, here's Fidelity's app, download it through my link in bio, et cetera. Kept the pitch very small and organic to that piece of content. So even provide value while you're selling.
Yeah, exactly. Everything is about value. This has been really fun conversation, Nick, and I feel like I could keep going, but I'm conscious that we're kind of coming to the end of our time. I'm curious, what are you reading or listening to now? Books, podcasts that are inspiration for you and your creation and your creative journey that you think the audience might get something out of?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, most of the stuff I listen to is like general business building podcasts. Like I love like My First Million is a big podcast I listen to a lot. I think more specifically like lead generation and kind of product development Alex Hormozy's stuff, I mean, that's probably a name you hear all the time. His stuff is absolutely phenomenal. Most of it's free, so it's really easy to access. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't pay attention to it. I mean, usually people that pay attention, but his stuff is so good that you should listen to it regardless, because it has a lot of very valuable insights that really helped us kind of refine the offer that we're offering at N2 and kind of get the word out there about the stuff that we're offering here. And obviously content's a big part of that.
Yeah. So those are two books that Alex has out. So one is $100 million offer, which is the kind of the first book, and then $100 million leads, which is a follow-up. So the first is more about the service and how to package it and price it and make the offer that is irresistible. And the second is how to get that offer in front of as many people as possible that might be interested in buying. Nick Meyer, thank you for coming on the Augmented Advisor. This was awesome, a lot of fun, and I'm sure the audience is going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.